Hi, everybody. Hi, it's great to be here again. Um, so we are even more than halfway through the Disruption Forum on sustainability, and we will continue the subject that Tomek was discussing in the previous section. So this panel is about how digital solutions empower underprivileged and underrepresented communities. And I would like you to imagine this, or kind of really take it. Our next speaker comes from a country where people are jailed for what they say online, and where building a digital communication platform is against the law. And you will not see our speaker because she protects her image to stay safe. Esra'a Al Shafei, a Bahraini civil rights activist, a blogger, and a founder and executive director of Majal, is our guest speaker today. Hello, Esra'a.
Oh, and thanks for having me.
Oh, that's wonderful to have you. That's great. Let's do a little warm-up because we've been running the Disruption Forum for a little while right now. We have some more sections to go. So before we go into the conversation, if you were to recommend, I don't know, an artist or a song or a genre and MIDI tunes for people to listen to today in the evening, what would it be?
I would certainly encourage people to visit and check out some of the featured artists that we already have, because it really depends on what genre people prefer. We have really everything from electro, dance, hip hop, jazz, and much of it is political. So you're singing and you're bopping your head to it, but at the same time, you're actually listening to someone's really inspiring and moving stories about fighting for social justice through music.
That's incredible. And to me, it's very fascinating how music can be the tool to fight for social justice. And we will come back to it. But what I want to start with is you came up with the idea of Majal years ago. And through this, you also decided to take the risk that keeps you unrecognized until today. So that must have been for a very important reason. And tell us the reason.
Sure. So for me, there are two reasons. The first is, of course, my work is considered very controversial where I am. In any repressive society where you work for social justice, there will be direct consequences. So our personal security becomes very important. You know, I have to protect not just myself, but also my family without compromising on the quality of our work as an organization. So for this,
yeah.
and for this reason, I made a decision when I started this work that I will be physically anonymous, because the other reason is that in this day and age, we are surrounded by facial recognition software, surveillance, drones, and beyond security, this is also a measure I take to protect my privacy, because I feel that without this privacy, I lose the creativity that I need to sustain my work, because I will be surrounded by fear. And more, we see how this privacy is becoming a privilege and not a right that we all have. And it's a very terrifying reality that we're living in today, where everything we do is tracked. And in countries like mine, that means you can't be a political advocate. You can't call for change. You can't fight for your rights and for your dignity without risking your life. So really, that's why I go through these extreme measures to ensure that I will be physically anonymous, because it's the only reason really I can maintain my work.
So behind this, the main reason was that you are fighting for the freedom of expression and social justice with what you do. And I remember I was listening to you on Monday when we had the interview. You said that we don't have to scale everything. Now, Majal has a number of platforms, and they are addressing different issues or different problems, addressing and solving. But they have one thing in common, and this thing is that they empower people. And now we maybe can come back to this music part. I mean, music is not the only platform. Mm-hmm. If you can tell us more about these platforms, there's even more than 4, I think, or 4. And if you can just elaborate, how do they work to empower people? Isn't it just a platform?
For me, so I have always been against the idea that we need to build just one thing that scales globally. I think there's a lot of power and impact when we build various platforms for marginalized communities and underrepresented voices. And they don't have to be big. We are told by the tech industry and also by foundations that to have impact, you have to have millions of users. And that's not true. And in fact, it's a dangerous narrative because everyone builds to reach that. That type of metric rather than building to actually have a positive influence on people's lives. So all of our platforms are over 12 years old and we really take our time building them. We do our best to secure these tools, to grow it slowly, to understand what our users want, but most importantly to really reach the right audiences and make sure that we're making a good difference in their lives, as well as serving a real need. For example, as you mentioned, we built Midi's tunes. And the reason we did that is we wanted to find a creative way to bypass censorship and surveillance. And one way to do that was, of course, through music. So Midi's Tunes is a platform for independent musicians in the region who use music as a tool for social justice advocacy. You have anything from women hip hop artists in Egypt singing about gender equality, to artists in Iran singing about religious freedom, to Kurdish artists singing about the right to their identity and their culture, which has been punished, for so long. And this platform helps us reach young listeners who otherwise wouldn't be interested in human rights. And it also celebrates the diversity in our societies. So
let's stop for a second, because I'm wondering, are you observing the increase of people creating music?
Absolutely, especially with the increase of access to these tools and technologies, more and more people are finding, they see open source editors, they see software that is more accessible, devices that are more accessible. The digital divide is slowly but surely decreasing. And things are becoming more affordable for people to actually become creators and not just consumers.
That's super powerful. So, okay, you say, so Midi's Tunes is just one of the platforms where music is used to kind of overcome the censorship and to go with a message. What are the other platforms?
So another example is ahwa.org. Ahwa, by the way, is the Arabic word for passions. And it's a platform for LGBTQ communities in the Arab region. And we use gamification to protect our users. So if you want access to the chat room, for example, or to more sensitive areas of the site, you have to have a certain number of points. And you get points based on the quality of your contributions. So the more helpful you are, the more supportive your topics and comments are, the more points you get. So you end up unlocking more intimate parts of the site where users feel that they can trust you, even though no one knows who anyone is. Because, of course, for a site this sensitive politically and socially, we have to be extremely careful. And to do that, we have to enforce anonymity throughout the platform. But the challenge was, and I'm sure people are thinking, what usually goes hand in hand with anonymity is bullying and trolling.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is why we developed the point system as something to experiment with, where we can ensure that that the platform still has a positive environment without people, coming in and becoming bad actors, essentially. And I just want to remind people that, of course, in our societies, to be a part of this community, you're risking your life, but you're also risking your livelihood. People don't get hired because they were found out to be a member of this community. They get fired, they lose their jobs, they don't get enrolled in universities. It's extremely sensitive. And so we were lacking a place where people can go to and really be who they are online. Because, of course, if you go to Facebook and Twitter, the algorithms don't work in our favors. Often in these types of environments, the bullies end up winning. So there are many, many pages and groups, for example, on Facebook that have been reported by bullies and trolls. And Facebook often shuts down those pages and suspends the victims rather than punish the bullies, because of how the reporting mechanisms works.
So in the system that you are introducing, the point system is that bully will not get points.
Right, because people won't say this was helpful. And so the bullies will still be there, but they're talking to themselves, really. No one else is talking to them. So they become irrelevant because they're not really graduating to unlock other pages on the platform. They're not there to access the chat room. Can they game the system? Of course they can. But you can imagine a violent
Mhm.
homophobe having to say very positive things about the LGBTQ community before being able to then join the chat room. It's sort of reverse psychology. And many trolls will refuse to do that because they're so against this community, they can't even fake their love or their tolerance or their respect for them. And so it ends up really working in our favor. So for the past 12 years, for example, we essentially had a platform where bullying was at an extreme minimal and people started feeling a part of something that they feel safer,
Mhm.
and more supported.
That's very strong. I remember going through a research that the outcome was that when people feel safe, they can be more, not even effective in they can do much more of their projects. And I remember that referred to work, but it wasn't about diversity only, but it was in the first place about feeling safe. So this is
Exactly.
exactly what you're saying. Okay, we have two platforms. You said Ahua and MIDI Students. Then there are more.
Yeah, so there's more. I want to go, in the interest of time, into detail about all of them, but just,
Okay.
quickly, for example, Migrant Rights, we developed also a platform where we do a lot of data curation because it's so long story short, um, migrant workers live in deplorable conditions in the Gulf region. And in fact, they comprise the majority of the population, even though they're invisible. They're extremely marginalized. They have little to no rights whatsoever. And, we have the kafala system or the sponsorship system, was essentially is legalized slavery. A migrant worker comes in, they have to give up their passport, they have to give up their rights, and they can't really advocate for themselves because it's outlawed. So you end up having a situation where people are homeless, where people are being killed, where people are committing suicide because they're in debt and they can't send money back home and they can't travel back home without their documentation. So it was very difficult for us to raise awareness about this issue in a place
Mm.
that is so rife with censorship and surveillance. So the internet became one of the few ways in which we could advocate for their rights. And so we developed a platform in which people can go in and learn about this issue, but also through storytelling. So we share a lot of stories, we share a lot of videos of these migrant workers, so people can really understand what's happening from their own perspective. At the same time, we share a lot about policy change. We do advocacy to change the laws to protect these migrant workers and the domestic workers. And we also develop techniques where you can go in, for example, and you can put yourself in the shoes of a migrant worker. And so you go in and, it's almost like a quiz where you say, okay, you're a migrant worker. What will you
Mm.
do if your rights are, being
Mhm.
abused? And you say, well, I will do this. And based on the options that you pick, it ends up telling you why this option is not enough to actually free you, from the situation that you're in. So it shows us how technology is so important in tackling this issue. But you can see how already I've discussed 3 platforms and there's more, but each platform we build, we do it in a very unique way. We understood from the very beginning that there will never be one platform that fits everything you try to do. And we need to make it clear that that's okay, because this is the issue with many sites today. You go to one place and they have 500 features because they're trying to solve too many needs and they're trying to reach too many different people and communities. And users, in fact, get overwhelmed by this and it doesn't feel very native to them.
Yeah.
They
So
feel,
actually, yeah.
yeah, I
Go
mean,
ahead.
imagine you feel really respected when you think this platform was built for people like me. So I want to be a part of
Mhm.
this. But if you
Mhm.
go to a place like Facebook, it's just like something for everybody. And of
Mhm.
course, you don't trust it. And it's not really a homegrown initiative. And of course, you don't know what's going on with your data. So it's absolutely critical to build for specific communities with specific needs rather than enforce a one size fits all approach, because then we end up repeating the same types of issues that we see with larger sites where many people feel lost, isolated, and insecure.
And that really kind of links to my next question, because we live in bubbles. I mean, probably most of what you're saying is completely strange or unfamiliar to people in different places in the world. They might maybe not have even idea that this is needed or this is the way you can amplify voices. So my question would be, how do you think that our audience today, so people who could, I assume, easily join the event, I hope easily join the event, could amplify your work and what you are doing, how we can help?
The best thing, first and foremost, is to understand also that the struggle for encryption and for privacy is a global one. It's not just for people who live in repressive societies, because even the most democratic countries today can become repressive based on who gets elected next. They could then enforce laws and policies that will make surveillance become the norm as well. Um, so that's one way to help, is to fight for privacy and encryption for everybody, including yourselves. And another good way to help is to spread the word on these types of projects that are coming out of places like the Middle East, especially things like Midestunes. We think there's a lot of value for people outside to discover the voices and talents of these artists who risk so much just to be heard and to show their talents. There are some artists, for example, in Gaza, who sell everything just so they can buy one instrument, so they can make their voices heard.
Mm-hmm.
And many people who risk their lives, in places like Iran and places like Turkey, if they're singing in Kurdish. I would really encourage you all to listen to those voices and supporting these artists, and look at some of the creative innovation coming out of a region that for a very long time has been dismissed as conflict ridden and hopeless, because our issues are not isolated. We share many common challenges even with Europe. So there's a lot that we can learn from each other, and ways in which we can collaborate, including through technical collaborations and projects around privacy.
You say, I mean, when we were preparing like a few weeks ago, you said it took you 7 years to figure out the financing and have a legal bank account to actually run this initiative. How do you keep your initiative running today?
It was a huge challenge. Our organization was not allowed to register as a nonprofit where we are. So everything had to be approved by a government agency. And of course, for something like this, it was never going to happen. So we had to find ways to bypass those logistical issues. Because, for example, we'd apply for a grant, and then they say, you don't have a valid bank account, so you don't get it. So even though we were eligible, we did not have the logistics figured out. So the world, including international banks, made it very difficult for organizations like ours to survive. But we were very motivated not to fail. We had to be very persistent. We were rejected by so many global and local banks. No one wanted to work with us. And finally, we registered remotely as a legal entity in the Netherlands, which provided a bit more flexibility for us because, we were collaborating with a few prominent organizations there. And then we were very lucky to have gotten a human rights award from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But that was pure luck. Not everyone is going to be in that type of situation. Most organizations like ours don't have those types of connections to facilitate their legal registrations. So today we still work incredibly hard to maintain our work financially. We do consulting work on the side. We try and fundraise. We rely on online donations. And of course, it's much harder now because COVID, made it very difficult, as our fundraising relied heavily on traveling and on speaking engagements at conferences, which don't exist now. And virtually sometimes it's not the same because like the connections aren't being facilitated, and very few people are making financial contributions today because our fate, across the world is uncertain. So for us, every single day is a major challenge because you imagine that you have a government that has endless resources and that are investing billions in censorship and surveillance, and you have this tiny nonprofit that is struggling to pay Amazon Web Services invoices every month. So every dollar we raise counts, and we invest all of it back into our platforms and our long-term sustainability. And one of the hardest things we've had to do recently, for example, is we had to shut down one of our platforms due to lack of resources. And it's a very emotional thing to do. But there are some projects where if we shut it down, for example, it will be incredibly harmful to our communities because they gain so much from them. For example, the LGBTQ community, for Midestunes, for Migrant Rights, so we feel responsible to keep them going. However, it doesn't mean that each day isn't a huge challenge, for us to keep our servers running securely, to keep our teams afloat, to keep our operations going, and then to stay ahead of repressive regimes as it relates to, censorship and surveillance. So it's not an easy time for us, but the only thing that kept us going is also our optimism that things can get better with the support of collaborations and the collective efforts.
Yeah, this is what I also wanted to ask, because each time I'm listening to you, or each time I'm reading an article or watching an interview with you, I have these, several feelings at once. That it's very courageous what you do, and I am inspired, but at the same time I am a little bit frightened. And I felt like, okay, so you carry this with you for all these years. It's like, so there has to be something that keeps you going and keeps you being motivated to continue the work. I don't know, maybe this is too individual, this question, I don't know that, but I'm really kind of
The interesting thing
impressed by
also
it.
is, yeah, and we've had the same team that's been working remotely for more than 15 years, the same team,
The same team,
And
okay, yeah.
so you can see that, and this team, they can go out and they can make so much more money doing other things. But one thing that brings us all together is this, undying motivation to do the responsible thing. And we're not doing it to get famous, obviously, because if we were, my face would be everywhere, for example. But, we're doing it really because we grew up in these communities and we feel responsible to speak up and correct these injustices. At the same time, we're not naive. We knew when we started out that this was going to be so difficult, but somebody had to do it. And at the same time, we wanted to motivate other people to understand that advocacy is not a weekend project. You can't just come and say, I'm going to build an app, and then 2 months later, you get bored and you move on to the next thing. And this is how the world functions. One day it's climate change. The next day it's COVID. The third day it's access to healthcare. Then it's access to education. And this lack of consistency is why we have not made much progress in the world, because the public opinion is shaped by a lot of mainstream media, and mainstream media decides what we pay attention to and what will receive funding. For us, we've always said these are the issues that matter, regardless of whether or not it is the hot topic of the day, and I think the more people think that way, the more progress we can all make, because then we're not just jumping from one thing to the other. We're then saying, no, the fight for my life will be climate change and the environment, period. And then you're not jumping from one thing to the other, all the time. I'm being distracted by what society tells you have to be thinking about next. Of course, you can care about other issues like racism and homophobia. But then if you invest too much time, abandoning a project and taking another one, that becomes an issue. For us, the thing, I know that we have several projects that tackle many different things, but what makes us different is that we never abandon one thing to say, we're going to take this, next. We never abandon a cause. We may abandon an app, but then we develop something that might be even better for a specific movement. So that's what I would encourage people to really think about is, don't worry about how many people retweet your message, how many followers you have. It's a very slow, step-by-step type process. People won't listen to you for 5 years, but after 10 years, they will. After 12 years, they will. It doesn't have to be overnight. And if the press doesn't care about what you're doing right now, in 10 years, they will. So I would say keep it going and, continue chugging along, and slowly but surely you will be building a community that will surround you with the support and, the tools that you need to really thrive.
That's really powerful. I have noted that down. So you said advocacy is not a weekend project. So I'm totally convinced to it. And I think this is a challenge of today's world, that we are somehow, we have so many informations coming and we need to choose. And in order to do things effectively, we need to get to know them thoroughly. And that's a challenge. So I love this consistency. Let me check if we have any other questions from our audience. But I don't see any other questions here. Is there anything you would like to share with people who joined us today, like a call for action, or anything you would like to leave our audience with?
Really just the embrace collaboration is what I would say. Be a part of movements, be a part of communities. If you feel that you don't have the time to go and do something on your own, then you can join something existing and feel that you have what it takes to contribute. Sometimes people come to me and they're like, what do I know? I'm just a developer, well, guess what? Your skills are needed now more than ever. Or people come and they say, oh, I'm just a writer, I don't know. Every person has a skill to contribute. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to, nobody's there to judge. on the way and the manner in which you commit. We all have our personal struggles in our personal lives as well, whether it's health issues, families, financial situations. But the more we see that a lot of our problems are also connected and there's a lot of intersections, for example, the struggle for encryption, the more we realize that, we are, there is so much that we can do if we just remove the distractions from the world, remove the pings, remove the fact that, everybody's fighting for my attention, and set that time. Maybe it's once, 1 day a week, maybe it's 1 day a month, but do set that time and think, what is it that I really care about and how can I best contribute to this issue? If it's like women's harassment, or I want gender equality, or racism, or, movement building, everybody cares about that one thing that really helped define or shape their lives. And I would really urge people to go after that, and to go after that in a very sincere way, without it being about yourself, but making it about the cause.
Thank you for this. This is really inspiring. And I think it's also a good moment to say that we are, with Disruption Forum Sustainability, supporting fundraising for Majal and what Esra'a is doing with her organization. And you got that message in your email. So again, use this opportunity to support what the organization is doing. And thank you so much for sharing this. And thank you for repeating many things to us. And I totally agree with the fact that, it takes sometimes years to keep saying the same things for people to kind of take it inside and understand. Appreciate that. And thank you so much again, and speak soon. See you soon. And let's stay in touch.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.